Tonight we start our newscast a little differently. We will be dedicating the first part to talk about a growing crisis within our school districts, both locally and across the state. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Matt Templeman. It is no secret some teachers have struggled during the pandemic. Their stress levels are at an all-time high, causing many to consider leaving the industry altogether. So this evening, KEZI 9 News anchor Karly Tinsley is diving into the issue and what can be done to help before there is a mass education exodus.
The growing problem within our education system is complicated. It's something that has multiple layers at the local, county, and even the state level. It's why I spoke to not only teachers and a professor, but those who work at the legislative level as well. Solutions will not be found overnight, but if they do not come at all, there will be ripple effects that could end up impacting your children.
This is not sustainable. You know, what we're doing right now is not sustainable long term.
At first, everyone was saying we're all in the same boat, but we're really not. We're all in the same storm, and it is hard to imagine continuing at this rate.
What's our society going to be like? We have huge shortages. We were optimistic because we really wanted our students in the classroom. We knew that was how best to teach them. We knew that we would have lots of challenges. We didn't know exactly what those challenges would be.
When sixth grade teacher Carmen Duato started this school year, there was a sense that things would feel slightly normal. After months of online learning, then hybrid, being back in person 5 days a week, face-to-face with her students, seemed like a luxury.
We were very excited to be back in the buildings.
Yet nearly 4 months into the school year, that excitement has morphed into quite the opposite. Teachers like Carmen say they are exhausted. The pandemic continues to put a strain on staff members who are constantly having to adjust lesson plans and spend extra hours preparing.
You know, I feel like I'm just putting out fires and I work a lot more. I mean, as teachers always kind of put in the extra hours, but I definitely work a lot more than I did before the pandemic.
Then there's the students. They've missed nearly an entire year of in-person instruction. School counselors have seen a rise in behavioral changes, instances of lashing out, leaving teachers unsure of how to teach and take care of their emotional needs.
I'm constantly having to change what I'm doing every single day because I don't know, what my students are going to be able to process and handle, and we as teachers don't even know how to help them process it or have the time to help them process that, let alone teach.
It's a feeling not mutually exclusive to those who've been in the field for years. Over at Kelly Middle School, Tim Everett is just finishing his first real year inside the classroom, despite starting his teaching career back in 2019. So he's hardly known education outside of a pandemic. But still, he knows what they're going through is not normal.
I come to work every morning at about 6:45, and I don't leave sometimes until 5 o'clock at night. And I also put in hours on the weekends, and I know that I am not alone.
The time that Tim doesn't spend with his own students, he's often helping other teachers. He sometimes uses his free period to cover other classes, since the pool of substitute teachers is dwindling as well. During many of those classes, students are now simply being supervised and not instructed.
The students' needs are not being met the way that things are, and that breaks our hearts.
The stress level among teachers is mounting. Many who were near retirement took it early after the 2020 school year, and with little improvements this year, there is a worry that more will follow.
And there's people who are, really, I'm just gonna get to the end of the year.
The proof is in the numbers. In late October, the Eugene Education Association surveyed teachers to gauge their stress and exhaustion levels. Out of 800 responses, 80% said their workload and stress level is more extreme this year than any other past year. Nearly half said the stress was impacting their emotional health. And then there's the biggest concern, the number of those who were considering leaving altogether. 250 teachers. For an already stressed system, the potential of a mass exodus could shatter it.
There are a lot of teachers who are just, really on the edge.
But is the pandemic the first domino, or rather just the final straw? University of Oregon professor Jerry Rosick's research over the past year looked at just that.
And I think it was a very heavy last straw. That is breaking this camel's back for a lot of people.
Rosick and his students' research project focused on interviewing teachers locally, across the country, and even across the globe. They looked at each individual's experience during the pandemic and found one constant throughout their conversations.
And it was just a persistent sense of not being able to live up to the needs that were in front of them. And that was not new to the pandemic. It was intensified by the pandemic.
Their research found that feeling was amplified among special education teachers who were now responsible for educating parents on how to teach their children during online learning. Then there were the teachers who had transgender or LGBTQ students, unsure if they were comfortable in their home setting. It created this constant state of worry, pushing long-term educators to their wits' end.
Veteran teachers would say, if I had an option right now, right, I would get out.
Just like their research showed, the first few dominoes seemed to fall way before the word coronavirus was in our vocabulary. If you ask teachers, some will say it's the lack of funding that's gone on for years, while class sizes and inflation continue to grow.
Education in Oregon was not on a really solid footing before the pandemic.
Bob Estabrook, the government relations specialist for the Oregon School Employees Association, says you could look at ballot measure 5, passed back in 1990. That put a cap on the local property taxes, and at the time, those taxes were supporting all of the school districts. It then shifted the responsibility for most of the funding of public education to the state.
What that has led to over time, because there's never been a really significant change in how the legislature derives revenue, or how they are going to deal with this really critical priority that became the largest chunk of the state budget. We have continued to not get there in terms of fully funding our schools.
Bob recently spoke during the Joint Committee on Public Education, where the report on adequacy of public education funding was discussed. It documents how adequate funding is after the legislature passes a school budget. It paints a picture of what Oregon schools could look like if they were fully funded, like a higher predicted graduation rate. The report even states that the amount of money for 2021-2023 is insufficient to meet the recommended funding levels. However, it has improved compared to years past.
They are closer this year, based on the most recent budget, than they've ever been before, which is good, but still not getting our schools to the level that I think Oregonians expect them to be at.
The report lays out the reality in black and white. The average teacher salary has grown about 2% over the past decade. The statewide annual report card reflects much of the same. After adjusting for inflation, this graph shows that the salaries of only the superintendent, that's the blue line, have grown over the years, while the salaries of teachers, principals, and more, the green, red, and purple lines, have essentially been flat.
And because we have spent a long time not fully adequately funding our schools, that has compounded the challenges. So we have long-term employees who feel like the cavalry is never going to come.
Some would say at the root of this issue is a simple equation. More resources plus better pay equals better retention. But when the state has not made major adjustments in decades, will the potential of a mass exodus be their first domino of change? Bob hopes to discuss bonus pay or additional recruitment efforts to get quality employees into open positions during February's legislative session.
but it isn't just a short-term conversation. It is absolutely a long-term one, so that ideally we can stop having, every 2 years conversations about the potential crisis or the nearing crisis. The crisis is here, so we need to dive in and get it addressed.
Other lawmakers are starting to step in, like Senator Michael Dembro, who's put together a work group made up of lawmakers, classified workers, and teachers. Their goal is to have short-term solutions by January 7th and more in the following session. The hope is that if the crisis can be controlled, then the conversation around education can be changed as well, that the negative connotation will peel back, restoring a profession that many still love, who, despite all of these challenges, continue to show up each day.
We don't spend enough time talking about it, how amazing it is to be a teacher. And it's amazing. That's why I'm doing it. Because, and I can't even say this without getting emotional, because I go every day to school because of those students, because I love connecting with my students and knowing that what I do impacts the greater good.
They are the ones who sit with our children 5 days a week. They are responsible for shaping the minds of our next generation. It's a profession that many are not cut out for, but for others, it is exactly where they are meant to be. So for those who can't, don't. But for those who can, they are the ones who teach.
Every day when I see my kids, I know that I have these wonderful relationships with them, and I know that it affects them in a positive way, even though I can't meet all of their needs. But I do see some hope that some of these things are coming to light, and we might see some positive changes as a result. And I really want to be a part of that.
Now, this is an issue that tonight we merely scratched the surface of. It is the start of conversations that many hope will be the start of meaningful change. And to follow along with the activity of the Senate Education Committee, you can do so on their website under Educator Workforce Workgroup. And we will have a link on our website in this story. Karly Tinsley, KEZI 9 News.